Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to our first hybrid event, the EU Campaign Insider Series, where we meet with campaign professionals from across Europe, and where we have a discussion with them about, their story, best practices. In this case, we have a very interesting event lined up, and it's going to be different from the ones we've been running so far. This event is going to be about how to campaign against authoritarians, and we will focus on the case of Hungary. There are many other examples in Europe, unfortunately. So it is very important that we, pro-European campaigners, we come together to share best practices and to try to win at the ballot box in every election. And that is the main purpose of these events. The session today is hybrid, which means I have a group of people surrounding me at this time, and it's great to see people back in person. And what we will do is we will have the first 30 minutes, we will have a conversation with our guest, whom I will introduce right now. And then during the last 30 minutes, we will go offline. You won't be able to follow the discussion, because the discussion is going to take place between the people who are participating in person. So if you have any question, please make sure that you send us the question during the first 30 minutes or during the next 30 minutes. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to Luis Cano, and he is a campaign activist who is based in Hungary and who is working with the opposition to Orbán. You are very busy these days, no, Luis?
That is correct. Being honest, we haven't been sleeping too much. We have pre-elections going on in Hungary, but it's an exciting time. So actually, thank you for the invite, and I'm excited to be here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly. So I guess, Luis, the first question that I've got is, what is doing someone with a Spanish-sounding name in Budapest fighting Orbán? I mean, tell us your story, how you ended up there, because I am very curious.
Yeah, that's correct. So basically, I am not originally from Hungary. I'm a Hungarian citizen right now. I've been living in Hungary for the last 11 years. But I come from a mixed background. My family is Colombian, actually, and I grew up in Venezuela. So populism is nothing that I don't know. Both of my parents escaped populism. I come from a family of politicians, basically. And then, growing back in Venezuela, watching as a child the Chavez regime, then basically, made me just jump out from Latin America and coming here to Europe. I mean, I came to Hungary to study in 2011 in Central European University, which probably about, which is the university that was kicked out from the government from being quite critical towards it. And then basically, this is the interesting thing, and then maybe some people might relate to this. When one person passes through the experiences of living in an autocracy like I had in Venezuela, you want to disconnect. You don't want to know anything more about politics. But then I think that when I started seeing similarities, when you start seeing journals being taken, when you start seeing editorial lines being bought, when you start seeing academia being attacked and civil society being attacked, that makes you think, well, when I was a kid, I couldn't fight the monster. Let me put on the fight right now.
So I mean, that makes your case. It's incredibly. I mean, you have touched upon like every single. And maybe you can tell us more about that, no? So every single symbol that Orbán and his crew has been trying to fight against. So of course, the university, the Central European University, but you also are very vocal about LGBT rights. Am I right? So in a sense, you have found in Hungary the fight for your own cause. No, I mean it's a very interesting experience, because what we see is that we're moving from people and debates that are national to something like more transnational. So, which is one of the reasons why we exist as a community. No? So tell us a little bit more what is your involvement in the campaign with one of the opposition parties? I'm very curious to know about what's going on with the primaries, please. And yeah, what's your role? Tell us something interesting for those who are following us today.
All right, great. So yeah, I work actually closely with one of the opposition parties. You mentioned it before. It's written down below. It's called Momentum Mozgalom. I've been working with us since before we became a political party. We were a movement, and basically 4 years ago we ran for the first time to the parliament, and then we didn't get in. We got 3%. The threshold is 5%, and then this is our second trial after successfully entering to the European Parliament, and then winning a lot of spaces in local elections back in 2 years ago. So right now, what we are having, for those of you who don't know, is fragmented opposition, which is basically a lot of political parties fighting the Fidesz government, which is right now holding 2/3 majority of the parliament. And then because in the last elections where I mentioned in 2019, we decided to go as a united opposition, and then not to fight with each other, but then to save, or like to fight for the democratic cause, which was more important for us. We decided to we realized that the change of regime after communism in 1989 was not finished. Orbán is basically doing the same thing that was doing the communist regimes, and then basically right now we decided to go against that to finish the job. The important thing that you need to know from us is that because we are in a respectful contest, and what we actually want to give a lesson of democracy, and we want to normalize democracy, is that we organize a pre-election of the opposition so we can go with unitarian candidates against the regime in April. So right now, this week on Saturday, we have we start a 9-day election for both the opposition candidate locally, and also for having, I don't know if this is very common everywhere in Europe, a common candidate to be the prime minister in case that we win the majority. So we do, it's very odd to say this, but we do the negotiations before we're there. So majority of people care about more coalition building. You see the Netherlands and so on after, we're doing it before. And then afterwards in April, we will be, competing against Orbán.
That is actually quite a very innovative strategy. I mean, it's. I think I've only seen it in Europe. Maybe I think in Turkey, where they really rallied against the mayor of Istanbul and the opposition to Erdogan. Can we do just one quick test, because maybe it's on my side, but I hear you very. I mean, your side is very low. Maybe if you can check if your maybe if you remove it and you get closer to the, maybe it works better, just to check.
Let's try like this.
I think it's the same, no, on our side. Okay, yeah, I can hear you, but it's just a little bit too low. So I thought it would be better to. Okay, no, let's. It's okay. Apologies for that. I mean, I guess the question is: has it got so grown in Hungary that everyone in the opposition is really rallying against him? And also, as a campaign strategist and an activist, I mean, how do you communicate this to voters? I mean, how do you explain that you are like a big bunch of people? Maybe there will be people you don't agree with, but that the cause or the end, which is defeating Orbán, is more important than that. How do you communicate that to voters? What's your strategy?
So first, yes, it has gotten to this point. It has gotten to a point that actually a lot of people understand that the Orbán regime has been, 10 years in government, and they keep blaming someone for not being able to govern. So at that moment, when you actually have that rhetoric, it has damaged already the Orbán regime, and it has informed the people that there's something wrong if the Orbán government still blaming someone for the faults that they have. So they, in a way, they have been doing the campaign for us, because they have been actually putting on the conditions for us to unite, and then to say, okay, so there is a democratic side, and then there is the Orbán side. Also, he has said it, himself, by opposing to every binding mechanism to rule of law in Hungary. So I think that they have set up the stage for us. But you're right, and one thing, which is there is a lot of control media in Hungary. You see more and more independent outlets being taken or bought by the government or by sectors, close to the government, oligarchs, and so on. And then, the campaign has been actually based on community organizing. This is a complete step back, because obviously we don't have the means to, run ads on TV. We don't have the means to do any ads on any newspaper. I mean, TV in the countryside, I travel to the countryside every weekend, and TV on the countryside, you turn it on and off, and it's always the same state TV. So basically, our campaign has been actually a very grassroots-based campaign. We go, we knock doors, we meet up people in the street. It's all about being street present. And then yesterday I was doing door-to-door campaigning. I was just knocking the doors and talking to people. Today I'm going to the street with my colleagues, and we're just giving leaflets. And it's just like being out there, which is actually sounds like the oldest trick in the book. But then I think that a lot of opposition parties here and then in Europe, across Europe, because I also work with with VVD, with D66 in the Netherlands. I think that many parties have forgotten to do that, or have forgotten to be constantly present outside campaign time. So what we're trying to do is always being present, and then have the feeling of a movement, not a political party that is looking up down to the people.
Thank you, Luis. I want to move on a little bit from, of course, you are in the middle of these primaries, and this is the most important thing you are focused on at the moment. It's critical. We, of course, wish you lots of success on that with your candidates. I wanted to move on and start a conversation about how is Europe and the European Union perceived in Hungary, how you are trying to build positive narratives about the EU in Hungary, and as you being at the forefront of the populist anti-EU bunch, what are you seeing that will perhaps be replicated in other countries in terms of tactics, narrative, anti-EU narratives? Tell us, you who unfortunately are at the edge. You are at the forefront of the battle.
One thing that always surprises us is that every time that the Eurobarometer comes out, we realize that strong feelings towards the European Union, and then the sympathy towards the Union is stronger here and stronger in Poland than compared to, for example, France or in the West. So European identity actually is actually very strong in Hungary, mainly because the people have noticed the development of the country since we joined the Union. So I think that you see the Union everywhere present here, and then I think that there's a lot of positive feelings towards the European Union, and those campaigns that the government has started against the Union, they actually have stopped because they realize that they are not good. So what they have been doing is actually building up a campaign against very individual people, against Jourova, against Juncker in the time. So like basically they are attacking one or two people instead of attacking the Union. And then what they have been built up is this narrative of Fidesz. Yes?
No, please continue.
So they have been building up a narrative of we are the savers of Europe. Now, the challenge for us is not to build up or to fight the anti-EU sentiment, because it's very strong here. The challenge for us is to fight the misinformation that we are traitors of the nation, because that's what we face every day. Our members in the European Parliament of all the opposition parties, for example, are fighting right now to pass the rule of law mechanisms. So let's put this and then let's put this in the campaign side. when we go to the street, actually, this is very important for us, that we do a lot of petitions, and then we do a lot of campaigns, even when we are not, when we were not in the primary preparation, because what we are doing is trying to get as many people involved in our, or subscribe in our newsletters, communicating with us, and then basically, for us to send them those emails clarifying, and then sending them those communications that can say, these are the reasons why we are on your side. These are the reasons why we are acting the way that we're acting. We're not trying to get sanctions on Hungary. We're trying just to stop, the sources of corruption for the government regime, for the government of Orbán. So I think that, like, if you think about it from the campaign perspective, it requires a lot of community engagement, which is what I was telling you, and in our communication.
Okay, thank you, Luis, so much. So the other day I was having a conversation. We were having a conversation. You probably saw that with some campaigners, some young political candidates in Norway. They just had an election there, and we had this morning after. It was very funny because one of them worked for the incumbent government and they lost the majority, so probably it was not the best time for him, but definitely he was very insightful. And one of the things that they told us is that they, Norway not being an EU country, of course, they were still missing someone from the EU, or an organization from the EU, or even an official, to be like very active, politically speaking, not only in terms of information, not only in terms of this is how the parliament works, which is, of course, it's nice to know, but someone with a way more like political weight, who is able to build the case, because they had a few in 1994, I think, they had a referendum to join the EU. They decided not to. But now there is one of the coalition parties is a Eurosceptic, and so the EU is always, maybe it's not at the ballot box, but it's always in the conversation. And so she said we miss people from the EU. On the other side, I remember when I was living in London, that everyone was saying, no, it's better than no one from the EU comes here to make the case, because then it will backfire. No. What is your view of on this topic? I mean, do you think that the EU is perhaps like too timid, too afraid to go head to head with Orbán, other than eventually defending themselves from direct attacks? I mean, do you miss the EU in the fight?
We do miss action. Yes, we do miss action, because then what we are seeing is actually a lot of political theater. And then that's actually, it was very visible in the speech of Madame von der Leyen yesterday. I think that it was, it was very missing a stronger commitment towards the rule of law mechanisms. It is visible that the mechanisms are not effective enough. And then obviously this is actually a symbolism. You're talking about, like, for example, actually how the EU is portrayed. And then I think that actually the EU is in a crisis, not only of rule of law, but also of advocacy and communication. Because then one thing that is actually very important for us, it would be that the EU is not based, on doing this, communication based on get to know the institutions, get to know this, but then also have envoys, if one says, that can actually go to the countries and try to do more symbolic things. I know that this sounds very interesting, but then for us, in a transitional democracy, which I consider a Central European, we're still in that process. We do need acts of symbolism that showcase more engagement with that. Because just put it on Poland, the case of the anti-LGBT areas, or the LGBT-free areas, could be better addressed with people from the EU actually going, delegations from the members of the European Parliament, people from the Commission, and then not only going and meeting up with Duda or meeting up with some government officials, but then also having a representation and saying we are here and we are actually doing the symbolic work on the ground. I do think that also in the European context, it is country to base debate, because as I told you, I the European feeling here is palpable because the money is palpable. So obviously, someone always asks me, "Can that be a hung seat?" No, it cannot be. I mean, we are too appreciative of the EU funds, and then that builds up the identity. Probably for Nordic countries or for Western countries, it's different. So I think that actually, what I can tell you is that at least for Central Eastern Europe, there is more feelings of we do miss, or we would like to have more acts of symbolism from the Union in order to make it stronger.
Okay, I know there are a few people working in communications inside the EU, and then the group of people who are with me today, they also come from pan-European organizations, and they do a lot of campaigning on Europe. So we'll have I'm hoping we have an opportunity to continue that in the second part of the debate. Tell me more about tell me more about how the not only the Orbán's like Fidesz, because I'm pretty sure that this in the end what Orbán has done is he's been able to broaden the base to people who probably were not thinking about voting for a national conservative guy, but that the guy is just speaking to the hearts, to the sense of dignity. And that's how he's pretty much picking up votes. So tell us what is the usual campaign tactics or the usual PR stunts that Orbán loves to do and that are very effective. Actually he is able to get the message across. I remember the last one, which I thought it was a PR stunt, and it's the fact that we talk about matters such as freedom of media in such a I don't know, in a very unsensible way. But he pretty much went to the when Hungary was listed as one of the countries with the less media freedom, he went to the regular magazine shop, and then he said, okay, can you give me one or two? Can you give me newspapers that criticize the government? And the guy, who was like very, sympathetic and the one was very, very cheerful, he gave a few to him. Of course, this is ignoring the fact that the guy has closed radios and newspapers, actually magazines, critical magazines that had to go outside of Hungary to be able to publish their journals. So, what is like to have him and his gang in front when it comes to campaigning and communications?
What I told you is in the climate of disinformation, I think that one of the things that Orbán does is, having two things: the means of communication and money. So basically, one thing that they do is that, they run, and then actually I met the other day in a coffee place, one colleague of mine, member of the LGBT community, working for the agencies that do these campaigns for Orbán. That's how it works. Actually, what Orbán has created is actually this system of people that has, that has no problem criticizing on the ethics of the campaigns. They just go about. So one thing, and then this is very important, one thing that you mentioned is expanding the base. Orbán has not expanded the base since 2014, when they actually stole the base of Jobbik, which was the right-wing party. So far, the strategy of Orbán when it comes to elections is to speak to these 3 or 4 million Hungarians that for sure will vote for him, and then disengage majority of people. The majority of those campaigns are actually trying to divide people and to disengage them, to make them feel that their vote is not going to count, that they cannot be defeated. And that's what you meet when you go and talk to the people. They say, Orbán is too strong, you cannot take him down. So the campaigns itself, they're very good. These are television campaigns. These are ads on YouTube you see and you cannot skip because they pay the full fee. And then they have a very good tool that is called the National Consultations. They do twice a year a national consultation, which everybody gets. I actually have one here. Everybody, I haven't opened it, But everybody gets this letter from the government, and it has, questions. It's a questionnaire about are you angry with Brussels? Are you tired that George Soros will come to your house and then teach your kids homosexuality? It's very guided questions, but then it's extremely effective because only very few people answer. But then the government informs this is the data. Majority of responders have said this. And then, of course, this is the narrative. And then the Fidesz supporters, they feel very strong. Opposition side, with that said, what we are working on is actually activating those people who are tired of the narrative of Orbán, who are tired and don't want to or don't see the point of voting. To those people who are actually very engaged with us, but then doubting with the fact that maybe how will be a united opposition govern? So the work is right now for the primaries to actually show a case that we are as democratic as we can be. That's why we're having debates. That's why we're having 9 days of election instead of 1, because what we want to show is under our government, there will be a transition towards democracy, and then those things will end up. But then the best way to fight this is actually, we don't have the money and we don't have the means. So it's talking to the people, going around and then talking to the people.
Interesting. I heard a lot of stories, but this one about this national consultation, it's because of course then who writes back? It's only those who are very enthusiastic about Orbán. So there you go. So you have all these poly methodologies and you throw them through the window. I want to pick before we move to the second part, the second offline part of the chat. I want to bring at least one question from social media. This one from Isi Shinoa, and there is like 2 parts. Okay. So she said, "Thank you very much, Luis. You mentioned that the mechanism of rule of law in place are not efficient enough, and mentioned acts of symbolism as a solution." And here's the question. What other parts of the mechanism are you missing on, or more legal institutional side? Do you think the conditionality will have an impact? That's a really good question, Isishino.
Well, I think it's a good question. It goes a little bit outside the campaign, but here is my take on this. I think that the conditionality will not have an impact, unfortunately, because what we saw when the negotiations for the budget were happening is that Orbán actually, on the short term, can put on still a lot of, stops to actually have, as long as there is this unanimous rule in the council, I don't think that the conditionality will have an impact. The important thing is that at least the mechanism is there symbolically, and then we can only work to make it stronger in the future. But then, I am 34 years old. I've been working in politics for around 6-7 years. And since my study years, 10 years ago when I was in university, we were talking about, how bad is the unanimity rule in the council. So how actually one country can veto everything else, because we were saying how the architects couldn't see this. So if we're talking about mechanisms, that's why I was talking about symbolism, because the parliament is already putting the symbolic part of it. But I think that the commission can actually have a lot of power doing more symbolic things, and then being a little bit more daring, and then getting out of the things. I know that this is very tough actually on the commission itself, but just put on the example of women rights. How many years pass until we have a proposal from the commission to have a legislation proposed against gender violence? Great that what Madame von der Leyen proposes that yesterday, but it came up too late. So I think that it's also our job to contact, and then to force, and then to contact our MEPs, their representation offices from the European Union, and then actually say, we want to have more symbolic acts that show that it's not a political theater, and then we understand that the bureaucracy is. I don't want to sound like a DM type of guy. I'm not about all reforming everything, but then symbolism actually matters a lot.
Thank you, Luis, and thank you, Sishinoa, for the question. What we are going to do is we're gonna stop this the live stream. So the people who have been following us, I want to say thank you for staying with us, and we will come back with more events like this. And if you're in Brussels, you will have the opportunity to come in person and be part of the second part of the event, which is the conversation between the people that I have around the table. So thank you very much to everyone who is following us. Luis, you don't move from there. Just give me 1 sec.